Wall Street begins the second half of 2024 on a strong note as the Nasdaq climbs to a record high. The Dow Jones and the S&P 500 also close higher. Investors will watch for cues on rate cuts from Jerome Powell when he addresses the European Central Bank later today. Stocks in the Asia-Pacific trade mixed this morning. Despite a strong handover from Wall Street, the GIFT Nifty is suggesting a muted start for the Indian markets. The crude rally continues, with Brent now rising above $86 a barrel as tensions rise between Hezbollah and Israel. Expectations of higher summer driving demand in the United States also is pushing prices higher. Hero MotoCorp sales rise 15% in June, comfortably beating estimates, while TVS Motors sales failed to meet expectations. Tata Motors commercial and passenger vehicle sales dipped in the month of June. And Marine Le Pen's led far-right party, the National Rally, wins the first round of snap elections in France, leaving centrists and leftist parties scrambling to negotiate to present a united front for the second round of polling, which begins on Sunday. Good morning. This Tuesday morning here on Power Breakfast on CNBC-TV18 in the Mumbai News Center. I am Hormuz Fatakia. Let's first start off with taking a look at how the Asian markets are faring this morning. And it's a slightly weak to a negative start, actually, as we speak. The Hang Seng has resumed trading after it was shut for a holiday yesterday. So that is the one that is outperforming and bucking the trend. The 0.9% higher is the Hang Seng, but the Taiwanese index is trading with cuts of around 0.4%. The Japanese indices too are trading with gains. So it's a bit of a mix start across the Asia Pacific. The Nikkei is up around 0.6%, as is the Topix, which has now gained over 1% this morning. The Kospi too, that is the South Korean indices, are trading with some bit of losses this morning. Now the yen, now the cues coming in from Japan, the yen has weakened to a 38-year low against the US dollar, falling to levels as low as 161. Pull up the GIFT Nifty as well, and considering the moves that we have seen on the Indian markets itself, the implied open now suggesting a 50-point gap up as we speak. So most likely we're likely to open at record highs for the Nifty. We closed around 30 points lower from those levels yesterday. But moving on to Wall Street now, and they began that truncated trading week with on a positive note. The tech-heavy Nasdaq advanced over 0.8% and closed at fresh record highs. The S&P 500 added around 0.3%, while the Dow Jones gained 50 points and was a relative underperformer. The US Treasury yields also gained as investors await key economic data due this week and digested the latest inflation data. CNBC's Julia Borstein gets us a wrap of all the action on Wall Street.
Stocks finished Monday higher to start the quarter as investors try to maintain the strong momentum from the first half of 2024. The Dow gained 51 points, the S&P 500 was higher by 15 points, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq was up by 147 points. Boeing agreed to buy back fuselage maker Spirit AeroSystems in an all-stock deal valued at $4.7 billion. Boeing spun off the company in 2005, but began talks to reacquire its supplier earlier this year after quality control issues at Sprint AeroSystems led to issues with Boeing's aircraft, most notably after a door panel blew out midair from an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9. The Supreme Court sent cases involving limits on how social media platforms regulate content back to lower courts today. The Florida and Texas laws were signed by Republican governors following the January 6th riot at the Capitol. They claimed the platforms were liberal-leaning and censored users with conservative viewpoints, including then-President Donald Trump. Trade associations challenged the law, saying it violated the platform's right to free speech. That's what's happening here in the U.S. Back to you in Mumbai.
And let's now listen in to what the experts have to say about the current U.S. inflation trends and the probability of rate cuts by the U.S. Federal Reserve.
We did get some good news, really confirming what we saw in the CPI report. We got some good news on the PCE index, which is the Fed's preferred index. And importantly, the 3-month average on that is now down below 3. It had gotten up north of 4 a couple months ago, and it's now annualized at running at about 2.7. So that's good news. I don't think the Fed will have enough new information to do anything at the July meeting at the end of the month. Our view remains that the Powell Fed does appear to want to get one cut in this year. But most likely, if we got that, it would be late in the year, say at the December meeting. It could get interesting if we continue to get better than expected inflation data.
Seasonality is positive for the first half of July. And I think more importantly, though, you have heading into earnings season, you have negative analyst sentiment in terms of earnings revisions. So we're seeing more negative revisions than positive revisions. We have some economic momentum has slowed. The city surprise index is near 2-year lows. So we're going to have a lot of data this week that's going to give us a sense of more urgency, whether or not there will be more urgency from the Fed to cut rates going forward, not because inflation has eased, but because the economy is showing weakness. So this is a big week for economic data, I think.
The economy shows more signs of weakness, particularly around the U.S. consumer. I think the stock market will begin to struggle because earnings estimates, which are pretty lofty, a double-digit gain this year and next, will have trouble getting there if that weakness sets in. Otherwise, it's a momentum market. I mean, today was just like the second quarter. S&P 500 up, average stock down. 4% the S&P in the second quarter, average stock down 3%. That's a tough headwind for stock pickers. I think we'll see more of the same till this momentum gives up, and the give up could be if earnings begin to disappoint.
And let us now get you the final update on our global market trap this morning. The European markets closed higher as traders digested the first round of France's election results. The French CAC closed over 1% higher. The German DAX gained around 55 points, while the British FTSE ended flat. The Stock 600 index closed around 0.4% higher, rebounding from 4 straight sessions of losses. And in more macro cues, inflation in Germany fell in 5 key states for the month of June, while the National Consumer Price Index on an EU harmonized basis declined to 2.5% in June from 2.8% in the month of May. Now, that's all we have on the global market action. But how will all of these overnight cues impact our own markets? We have our research team joining in with how the trade setup looks like and the stocks that are likely to be in the news today. Good morning, everyone. First up, Sudarshan is joining in to get us all the market cues we need to watch out for today. Sudarshan, how's the setup looking like?
Morning, Harma. So, well, if you thought that Friday was a speed breaker, come Monday, market has regained most of the losses it saw that day and closed near day's high. Nifty held on to levels about 24,100 and sensex about 79,000. And the recovery was led by IT, which saw buying ahead of their quarterly earnings, and brokerages see earnings improving for the majority of the IT names. Even banks too saw a selective buying that can be easily seen in the contribution list of Nifty. Major Nifty contributors yesterday were HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Infosys, TCS and Tech Mahindra. Talking about the mid-caps, the outperformance has continued, and that was the reason market breadth has remained healthy in favor of advances. Also, its impact was seen in institutional activities. We saw big buying by DIIs for second straight day. Shifting to global cues, on equity front, there wasn't much of a move. All 3 major US indices saw a close with minor gains, but concerns for us are yield and crude. US 10-year yield is now moving back to the level of 4.5%, and crude sees a further move, and Brent is now at $87 per barrel. And tracking all these, GIFT Nifty is indicating a start with minor gains, but at a record high for Nifty. Lastly, in the cues to watch, keep an eye on all these auto companies, especially Hero Moto, Tata Motors and TVS Motors, which have reported monthly sales post-market. And lastly, Fed chairman's speech is scheduled for today evening.
A record high, another record high on the anvil, if I can say that. Sudarshan, thanks a lot for that. Now over to Vamakshi, who would list up the stocks to watch out for in today's session. Vamakshi, good morning. Auto sales, business updates, what's on your list today?
Well, absolutely, Hormaz. It's a long list as always. Let me first start off with the auto sales. Keep an eye out on Hero MotoCorp. Total sales were up nearly 15.2% at 5.03 lakh units, and this has come in much better than what analysts were expecting. TVS Motors reported a jump of 5% in total sales at 3.34 lakh units. This is slightly lower than what analysts were expecting, but Tata Motors, total domestic sales were down 8%, CV sales were down 7%, and PV sales were down 8%. But the exports have picked up. They were up nearly 30%. 13% for the month gone by. Apart from that, operational updates have started to come through. South Indian Bank in its first quarter has reported gross advances downtick of nearly 10% on a YOY basis. Total deposits have also declined by 8%, but the CASA ratio has slightly improved to 32.64%. CSB Bank, on the other hand, has a good operational update. Gross advances saw an uptick of 18% and total deposits were up nearly 22%. NMDC, in its June business update, reported a downtick of 3% in its production and a downtick of nearly 9% in its total sales. They've also gone ahead and cut iron ore lump and iron ore fines by nearly rupees 500 per ton. Order wins galore for Welspun Specialty Solutions. They've received contract worth 117 crores. DCX Systems has received an order worth 1,250 crores. KPI Green has received Chief Electric Inspector's approval. This is for a couple of solar projects. Carousel has, the QIP has opened for this counter yesterday. The floor price has been set at 837.89 per share. Patanjali Foods will be acquiring entire non-food business undertaking for Patanjali Ayurved for 1,100 crores. And lastly, let's focus in on IOCL Chemicals, and that is because China's Drug Regulatory Authority, NMPA, has approved the company's product fenofibrate, and this approval in turn will enable the company to export its API in the Chinese market.
Plenty of stocks as always, Vamakshi. Thanks a lot for that update. And lastly, Nigel is joining in with cues from the FNO space. Nigel, good morning. Close to a record high now. What's the setup looking like?
Well, that's right. Flows seem to be very solid, Hormuz, particularly from the domestic flows that we're seeing. And that's the reason why the market continues to climb. Any kind of, headwind that comes in front of it. Just one point out here, the RSI is moving up. And in fact, it's moved to those levels where, you see some bit of a pullback. So let's see how that pans out. And with regard to the US market, so the headline index ended in the green. Yeah, the Russell 2000 that actually ended in the red. So the broader markets didn't really participate overnight. Let's get straight to the FNO cues then. The FIs, well, they added, some mild long positions in yesterday's trading session. And now the positioning is such that the net longs are around 3.5 lakh contracts. In percentage terms, the long positioning is at around 83%. And you pull up a chart of the FI and the client positioning, well, they are on opposite ends of the spectrum. The FI is a net long with 3.5 lakh contracts. The clients are net short with around 2.6 lakh contracts. That's on index futures. But on stock futures, both of them on the same side. So that's telling you that, in fact, we like to see more stock-specific action from here on, because on stock futures, both of them are net long as the screen is telling you. Now, in yesterday's trade, we ended higher, and you saw some bit of writing, 24,000 put, 24,100 put, which is telling you that at around the 23,800 odd, which we were at just a couple of sessions or so ago, went to around 23,805. That should be the first reference point on the downside. For those who are holding long positions, you want to mark that particular level, 23,800. On the upside, 24,250 could be a near-term resistance zone. If we get past that, then maybe, in fact, we get a couple of percentage points as well that move up. And since it's Tuesday, we'll be looking at the Nifty Financial Services Index, because that plays out the weekly expiry. So that'll be the mover in the last hour of trade. Back to you.
That'll keep the Nifty Bank in focus as well. Nigel, thanks a lot for that. Time for a short break. Up next, when we return, we get your excerpts from our conversation with the founder and chairman of Narayana Health, Devi Shetty. Stay tuned. Back on the other side. Welcome back to Power Breakfast. And now Narayana Health has forayed into the insurance sector, launching health insurance covering 1 crore rupees in surgeries for rupees 10,000 a year. My colleague Ritu Singh caught up with Devi Shetty, the chairman of Narayana Health, to get more insights on its new venture. Listen into some excerpts of that conversation.
Today, the patient and the hospital interest are at conflict. Because when I tell a patient you need a bypass grafting, first thing what comes to your mind is it really required, or this man wants to make some money out of me? Whereas when I become a health insurance company and I tell you need a bypass grafting, right? You have no conflict, because I'm going to pay for it. We want to cover working class people for 1 crore rupees of health insurance with the premium as low as 10,000 rupees, which is unthinkable. And we know we will succeed, because we are healthcare providers. We know, and we are not going to make them wait for 2 years, 3 years. We are going to cover them from day one, because we know how to screen people.
So, is that going to be the strategy to sort of capture more of the market? Because there are several players in the healthcare insurance space already. What is going to set you apart? Is it just going to be the affordability factor?
See, when you talk about the market, the health insurance market in India is very, very tiny, right? It is hardly anything. So our desire is that we should offer healthcare to at least 100 million families who are the so-called missing middle. If we can cover that missing middle, we would have transformed the healthcare of the country. And this is our strategy.
All right. Could you tell us a bit about, what next? You've started with a pilot project in Mysuru. How soon do you plan to expand to the rest of the country? And you're saying you have global ambitions as well.
Our desire is to come to Bangalore in the next few weeks. Okay. Then we want to launch it in Calcutta, where we have a large presence. Okay. Then we will go to Delhi. And you see, we want to be launching health insurance where we have a presence, so that we can control the quality of care. So this is the aim. Hopefully within a few years, we will be across the country.
Ritu Singh there in conversation with Dr. Devi Shetty. Now, time for a short break here on Power Breakfast. Up next, we get you cues from the commodity space. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Back with us here on Power Breakfast, and Manisha Gupta now joins in with all the updates from the commodity space. Manisha, good morning. What are you picking up?
Harma, thank you for that. Well, I'm looking at all the commodities actually behaving quite well today morning. We've seen buying across board, and this is ahead of the Powell speech today. Ahead of that, we also have seen the U.S. factory activity shrink for a month-on-month basis and below the forecast, and that has led to the U.S. dollar declining, quite supportive for various commodities. So I'll start with the crude oil prices, which are now trading at a 9-week highs. We've seen prices gain up by 6% in the month of June, and July has started quite on a positive note. This is also because there is high summer demand from U.S., there is conflict in the Middle East, and Hurricane Beryl is now moving towards the Caribbean islands, and this is the first of the named hurricanes. It's a Category 4 storm, and the markets do believe, with the kind of lineup that we have, that you could be looking at a 16 to 18 hurricanes in this season. That is a premium that you've seen come in for the prices. Not just crude, gold is trading on a firm note as well. Among the metal prices, zinc is trading at a 4-week highs. Copper prices gained 1% overnight. And you also have steel rebar, which was trading at a 7-year lows, also rebounding quite smartly overnight, as markets have seen stronger Chinese data come in as well. So as I said, most of the commodities trading in the positive in Asia right now.
A positive start for commodities. Manisha, thanks a lot for that update. Now, as the United Kingdom looks to vote for a new government on the 4th of July, the Labour Party is looking to return to 10 Downing Street after a 14-year exile. Now, as per pre-poll trends, the Conservative Party is staring at a crushing defeat. The Liberal Democrats and Nigel Farage's Reform Party are expected to eat into the Tory vote bank. Now, my colleague Sanjay Suri filed this story on the battle for Westminster.
A contrary pattern is beginning to emerge through the campaigning in the British elections underway. Face to face with Labour leader Keir Starmer, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is coming across as the more forceful, even the more convincing candidate. We saw that in the first debate between the two leaders, and we saw that again in the last one just days before polling. There's just a glimpse that last round where the two leaders clashed over immigration, among the other usual issues.
And that is the choice for you. Do not surrender our borders to the Labour Party.
Steve, this is complete and utter nonsense.
On the numbers.
Why are record numbers still coming under your watch, Prime Minister? How on earth can you say it's working? You put the scheme in place, the flights could go off. I noticed you've called the election, by the way, before any flights could actually get off, and it could be tested, an interesting timing. But if this was such a deterrent, why is it obviously not working?
So when Keir Starmer says he's going to return people, is he going to sit down? Are you going to sit down with the Iranian Ayatollahs? Are you going to try and do a deal with the Taliban? It's completely nonsensical what you are saying, right? You are taking I mean, you are taking people for fools, right? I think that these people should not stay in our country. They will be on planes to Rwanda. That's what I will do with them. You still can't answer the question. What will you do with them?
All the tens of thousands
all illegal migrants who arrive will be processed and put on planes to Rwanda. And those savings we will use to cut your taxes. And what I want to do is cut taxes for people at every stage of their life.
But in the end, the debates may not count very much unless the polls are all wrong. If the polls are right, then too many people have already made up their minds against the Conservatives, debate or no debate. Returning to Parliament as Prime Minister is not impossible, but it won't be easy. And of course, Rishi Sunak knows that.
All eyes now on the UK election. Now moving on, the US Supreme Court has set a new standard of immunity to its presidents, handing over a clear victory to former President Donald Trump with regards to his case in attempting to overturn the 2020 election verdict. CNBC's Eamon Javers joins in to fill us in on the rest.
The Supreme Court ruled on partisan lines this morning that former presidents have legal immunity from prosecution for official acts conducted while in office. The decision likely severely damages the special counsel's ability to prosecute his case against Trump for the former president's conduct in the run-up to the January 6th insurrection on Capitol Hill, and it sets a precedent that may usher in sweeping changes to the American presidency itself. The majority opinion, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, said, "We conclude that under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power requires that a former president have some immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts during his tenure in office." Liberal justices on the losing side of the ruling weighed in with scathing dissents of their own, including Justice Sotomayor, who wrote of the president, "When he uses his official powers in any way, under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune, 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 immune." The former president welcomed the ruling in his favor, writing on social media that he is proud to be an American and saying today's historic decision by the Supreme Court should end all of crooked Joe Biden's witch hunts against me. One person we've not heard from yet is Special Counsel Jack Smith himself. He now faces significant questions about how to proceed in his case against the former president. Unclear where all of that is going to land, but clearly some legal dust has to settle here before all sides can move on.
And before we call time on this edition of Power Breakfast, let's take a final glance at how the Asian markets are trading this morning. It's been a mixed start across the Asia Pacific, and the Hang Seng has now built on to its gains from the start of the show. It was around 0.8% higher when we began the show. It's now trading with gains of over 1.5%. And the Taiwanese index too has cut some of its losses. It was trading around 0.5% lower, and now it's almost about to slip into positive territory as well. The Japanese indices continue to do well. The Nikkei is up 0.5%, but the South Korean indices are seeing a bit of a struggle this morning. Pull up the GIF Nifty as well, and that continues to remain where it was. It is trading with suggesting an implied open of around 50 points. So on most likely, we're likely to open on a record high when it comes to our own markets. But the Japanese yen is the one in focus, which has fallen to a fresh 38-year low against the US dollar, falling to levels of as low as 161. But with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Power Breakfast. From me and the team that put this show together, thank you so much for watching. Bazaar Morning Call takes the action forward.